Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Breakfast Club. And so we are very pleased to welcome you here again today. And with that, I'm happy to introduce you to our group's co-founder and president, Frank Kovacs.
Good day, everybody. We have some exciting news for everybody. Not next month, our June meeting, but the following month, our July meeting, which is July 13th. We'll be returning to in-person meetings, and we have done a lot of work over the last month, looking at different sites. We've settled on the East Brunswick Public Library. The meeting time, due to the schedule of the library, will begin at 9:30, but you could start arriving at 9 o'clock. Get settled in. The way the meetings will work will be an hour presentation each month, and then we'll do an hour of facilitated networking. Uh, Brian Mecca and Adrian Roman will be returning as our greeters for everybody at the door as you come in. The East Brunswick Public Library is located in a very nice spot. It's not very far away from the hotel, which was right on Route 18 where we've met for years. Unfortunately, during COVID, the hotel was sold, and the new owner had significantly raised up the cost of the room, and then on top of that, they didn't want to agree to the terms and conditions. Let's say there was a situation like inclement weather, and as a result, we couldn't have the meeting. They still wanted us to be beholden to pay for the room, which was a little silly. So that's why we're changing our venue. The new venue actually, I think, has the ability to accommodate even more space, which is great. It has a stage, it has a podium, it has a nice screen to project from. And, after that, the East Brunswick Public Library has a lot of great programs. So they usually have nice things like different exhibitions or things on display. So as you come into the meeting, there'll be a lot of things to see and be exposed to. But in the back of the library, is a very nice separate section for the meeting rooms. And this way, we'll have a very nice environment. Um, with that, Jerry and David are very busy on, looking over our presentation and presenter schedule for the remainder of 2024 season for us, and also looking forward to 25. Alex has been instrumental because one of the big things at the library, one of the conditions, is you have to have $1 million life insurance policy. So we went through getting different quotes and negotiations and getting those costs down. So now that's all in place. And then the library is very rigorous on how the certificate of insurance has to be worded. So we made it through all of that administrivia, and we should be all set. So now it's just up to all of us to get the word out. We'll be putting together a nice notice of the meeting. Will still be always second Saturday of every month. The only difference is a slightly later start time again, and that was because of the library hours. There is ample parking there because it's in the middle of the municipal center of East Brunswick. So the library has its own large parking lot on one side, and then on the other side is the senior center. And a lot of times they don't have anything going on Saturday mornings because their use of their facility is predominantly during the week, which means there's a whole second overflow lot that's very conveniently positioned around the library as well. So ample parking, and it's in a fairly nice section of town, which is more open space around the municipal center, which is nice. And if you want to even you meet up with people and you want to continue the networking, there's a lot of different restaurants and even coffee shops in the area. So we'll even publicize that so it's out there. So if you want to do break off groups or one on one, you can go out and continue the conversation and make the most of the networking, especially if, some of the members that you're meeting with have come a long way or an opposite direction from you. It makes a nice ability. You could go out, grab a coffee, grab lunch, whatever you like to do, but to continue the conversation, continue the networking. So lots more coming on it. It was, we got a lot of hurdles thrown at us to get it in place, but we got it in place, and we'll be moving on to the next chapter of the Breakfast Club, which I think will take us to the next level. As you know, the last book we wrote was Win the Job and Thrive in a Multi-Generational Workplace. So we've been doing a lot of work on inclusion and looking at, not only the silent generation, the boomers, the Gen Y, but also the Gen Zs and the millennials. And we're going to have a conscientious effort of how to pull the younger folks too into the Breakfast Club. We've been working with both the different chambers of commerce at the town level, at the county level, and they have an interesting approach where they have a young professionals group within each of the chambers of commerce. So we're tapping into those. A lot of the universities in New Jersey now have a young professional or young alumni council as part of their boards. So we're tapping into that to pull in the professionals from those angles too. And I think that cross pollination will be very fruitful for all the members, because when Mark and I and Kadir wrote the book, we saw that, the different generations approach business solutions, business challenges in different ways, and including job search in different ways. And, we've always said it's not to say one's right, one's wrong, between them, but to expose everybody to them. And then if you know those differences, you will determine what works best for you. But being more cognizant, if you go into a job interview and let's say you are being interviewed by a millennial, you understand better where they're coming from, how to interact with them, how to connect with them. And that's what we're trying to do, is raise up that understanding so all the different groups in the workplace can work together and, in harmony and collaboration, and really draw the best from what each person has to bring to the table. So it's definitely consistent with our message that we've had for over 22 years now of diversity and inclusion. And we're going to make sure that that's part of all of our messaging and how we approach things. So hopefully we'll have a lot of net new members. We have a lot of members in transition every year that come to me and say, oh, my child is in job transition, or they're looking for their first job, or they want to switch employers, and they try and do it on their behalf. You know, the old adage is you could give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day, or you could teach them a fish and they'll eat for life. So if you come across people like that in your families, in your neighborhoods, tell them, invite them, make them feel welcome, go that little extra mile of teaching them how to sign up on the Breakfast Club site, join our meetup group, and come, because everybody will benefit at the end of the day, and the group will be that much stronger. So I'll be putting out that message. If you guys can help as the ambassadors and making everybody aware, we have a very large launch group that I've already targeted, thanks to Alex and others on giving me different lists. And, David's connected to a plethora of presenters and all, because his group, PSG of Mercer, meets every week. So he's got at least 4 times the amount of contacts we have in any given year. So we're going to get the word out there and really try and turn up the volume and get great attendance, and really make the relaunch a success. And I have a lot of people who felt that they were, definitely waiting for the opportunity to come back in person. So I think we'll see some pent up demand. So whichever way it goes, we have everything in place. It will be well supported, and I think you'll enjoy going back to in person. So with that, I'll turn the meeting over to Jerry from our presentation committee to introduce our presenter. And I think we'll have a really good meeting today and learn a lot to help those that are in transition. Go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you, Frank. And I want to say thanks for making it happen. I know you helped drive it all, but really appreciate you putting this together, because I think it'll be quite an exciting time to be able to meet again in person, because I think that's really what's necessary. So thank you for that. And thank everybody for making it happen there. Let me introduce today's speaker. Paul Cecala is a certified global career development facilitator, a work search author, and founder of Cecala Career Consultants LLC. Since 1999, he has assisted over 4,000 job executives to college students. Paul specializes in creating job search project plans and is recognized for his empathetic listening skills. He has also been praised for his networking skills, interview techniques, and resume writing expertise. He facilitates several job seeker network groups and has led career development programs at colleges and government workforce centers. I would now like to introduce Paul.
Thank you, Jerry, for that great introduction. I really, really appreciate it. One thing you hadn't mentioned, but I think that's probably because I didn't tell you or provide it for you, was that I have authored 2 books on the job search process. The one you see here now and what we're talking about today is my most recent book called Take Control of Your Job Search. And I'm very honored and fortunate that the illustrious Mr. Freund was so gracious as to write the foreword for the book. So you get 2 for 1 if you get a copy of it. It's available right now on Amazon. Has been a bestseller, actually. It spent 3 weeks on the bestseller list for career avocation. I think career vocation training, I think, was the category. It was a week on the bestseller for a couple of other categories as well. So let's get right into it. And to get a copy of the slides, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to do that. But a lot of what we're going to talk about, many of you may have seen or heard before, and it all is in the book itself, right? So we can, go back and forth a couple of different ways to get access to the material. As many of you know, I've often been referred to as the project planning career coach, because I take project planning principles, project management principles, and apply them to the job search process. And so what you're seeing here is a simplified Gantt chart of what the job search process might look like. And what I would suggest that you want to do is not only go through these different milestones or major goals and objectives, but you might want to break them down more. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, for example, with developing your personal brand, because there are certainly a lot of pieces to your brand. So maybe you want to break that out and say, I'm going to work on this piece today and this piece next week and that piece tomorrow and whatever. So we can customize this Gantt chart to work for you. And what I love about using something like this is it gives me a time frame for what I want to do and when I want to do it. Once I have that time frame, all right, I'm not going to necessarily, kill myself if I miss a goal or a time, but at least it gives me a framework for holding myself accountable and finding a way to keep moving forward through the search. And as you see through the weeks and the months, you can kind of track, am I getting closer to the job or not? And so this really helps us to get a sense of where we stand in the process and whether we're close to getting the job we want. You'll notice I think there's 2 different phases to the job search, the preparation phase and the active phase. The preparation phase, to me, is really the most critical. You're going to do most of your time and activity in the active phase, but if you don't have a good foundation, the house falls down. So the same is true with our job search. We need to have all this foundational work done before we try and go out and start networking and applying and interviewing, Because if we don't have this done, we don't have the materials and information we need to do the active job search. And I think that if you're doing a full-time job search, a month is more than enough time to get through the active phase. I'm sorry, the preparation phase. And my clients are finding that if they spend that time on the preparation phase, within 2 to 4 months, they're employed, depending on the specific level. C-suite would be a little bit longer, but most people within 2 to 4 months, they're employed during their active job search phase. So questions on the Gantt chart and how we're using that as a management tool. So there, oh, that is a mistake. I'm not sure it says why it says identify one. Got to get rid of that one. We'll do that later on. Anyway, the first step in the preparation phase is identifying what you want to do next in your career, right? Or as the Japanese say, finding your ikigai, your purpose in life. And of course, with the purpose in life, then we also have the purpose in work. And here are some ways that you can do that if that's where you're at in the job search. There's one step here that I think is really important for everybody to do, and that's step 2, creating the prioritized list of all your accomplishments. With that list of accomplishments, you can then create the car and star stories that are going to be the answers to all the interview questions, the conversation points for your networking, and the bullets on your resume. Many of my clients recently have been finding a lot of value in creating their own ideal job description. Now, I'm not saying here start with a job title. If you really know what the title is you want, hey, fine, do it. But if not, just start writing out what are the kinds of work activities you want to be doing on a day in and day out basis. What are some of the skills and requirements and expectations that you would want to have in your ideal work? And if you list all of those things out, in essence, create that job description, now you can look at that and go back and say, well, here's the type of job that fits the description. Let me go start looking for that. So those are just 2 things, but I really want to see everybody create their prioritized accomplishment list. One other quick note that I've been finding helpful, I love this Venn diagram, and one of the things that I find helpful about it is I've had clients start answering these 4 outer ring questions. What do you love to do? What are you good at doing? What can you be paid to do? And what does the world need done? And if you can create 4 separate lists that answer those 4 questions, you can start to then see where do they overlap. And so you know what your mission, your passion, your profession, and your vocation would be. And then where those all overlap, you found the work that you want to do. So there's a lot packed into this one slide here. But working your ikigai is really an exciting and important phase of the job search. And I would argue that all of us should do this at least once every 5 years or so, just to see, are we going down the path that's really right for us, or do we need to make a change? Any thoughts, questions, comments here?
I don't know if you saw the recent documentary on Shohei Ohtani from the Dodgers, but he, in that presentation, they call it a vision board. It's the similar approach of what he did in his life, and in order to plot out his whole rise to being a professional baseball player. It's very interesting to see it applied, from whence it originated.
Yeah, and that's a great addition. Thanks, Frank. I haven't seen that specifically, but I absolutely could see where if you do this ikigai work, you could then take it and put it to a vision board, which will take us further down the road than just the next 1 to 5 or maybe 10 years. And so you can vision, how am I going to get to where I ultimately want to be? That's a great concept. I love it. Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I have a question. Is this something that's advisable to do it on your own, or it's best to work with a mentor, a career coach that can kind of put you back on the road and keep pushing you? Because this must be very boring and hard, and there's no big incentive to sit on this topic for 8 hours a day.
That's true, Alex. And you know, even though I align or allow for a week to do this work in my timeline, it may not need a full week. It may need more, depending on your thought process and how introspective you are. Um, but at the risk of being self-serving for both of us, I would suggest that to have someone outside of yourself, preferably an independent third party who has no vested interest in your success, help you with this, could make it more valuable. But that doesn't mean you're not also consulting the people in your life. Right. So, yeah, I think all of us should have a team of people that we're working with in our job search. A career coach, potentially, depending on what your situation is, maybe a therapist, maybe a spiritual advisor, certainly some mentors from your career, trusted coworkers and allies. People who that when you talk to them, number one, they're going to give you the straight truth. They're not going to sugarcoat things. But also, number two, while they have, may want and enjoy seeing you succeed, they're not so emotionally invested that they're your best friend or your spouse, because that person's going to color their view from that emotional perspective. And we need to take some of that out in this case. But we all should have a team that we work with in our job search. And certainly a career coach, a life coach, a mental health professional, potentially a spiritual advisor, and potentially mentors would be able to help us with evaluating the information that we're getting out of these activities.
Paul, if I could offer a slightly different perspective, you know, we find a lot of people in job search. Many of them have been forced into it because of a downsizing or a company going out of business or uh, a, a merger and acquisition. There's a number of trigger events that cause that. But it's at that point that they're forced to do some self-reflection, as they enter into job search.
Yes.
And, you know, a lot of people find that at that point, they look back, they look at, what they went to school for, what they were passionate about, a number of different things, and they find out that they've kind of evolved through a series of life events into something that was much different because certain opportunities came along, it paid more, they had the responsibilities of, supporting their family, and they kind of wound up where they did and not a planned way of arriving there. So I think that what you're discussing not only is important for those in job search, but people even before they're in a job search to take a self-reflection, look back at where they're finding themselves and really determine, what is their level of satisfaction, where they are in their career, what they're doing, and in today's age, due to AI and automation and some of the professions and careers that have been there for years are going away or morphing, and the need for upskilling and reskilling, I see a much more mainstream need for this type of tool and this type of exercise for people in their life, and maybe multiple times, not just once, to recalibrate every so often and determine, are they really doing those things that they're most passionate about, is it headed in the right direction for the rest of the market? And as they're doing subsequent things in parallel, like financial goals and all, is what they're doing matching and going to give them the ability to meet their long-term goals?
So, Frank, I absolutely agree with you. I would encourage people from, junior year in high school through to entering retirement to do these kinds of exercises. And yes, it does need to be done, as I said, probably once every 5 years or so, just so you can make sure that you're on the path that you want to go on and that you can change path. And while I don't want to spend too much more time on this specific slide, but one of the things we want to be aware of is that a traditional career today lasts no more than about 10 years. Whereas our parents and grandparents may have had the same career for their entire life, maybe only 1, 2, or 3 jobs in their entire life. Probably all of us have experienced 5 to 10 jobs already in our life. And so research by the staffing agency says that a career will last 10 years and there's 2 jobs or 2 years per job within that career, which means we're changing jobs, every five times every 10 years, and we're reinventing ourselves to something completely new or very different every 10 years. And with the pace of change and technology that's taking place right now, and the disruptions taking place within the business world, as George is working on with the AI presentations, we're going to have to reinvent ourselves constantly.
Paul, one other piece I'd add to this, and I talked about this, back in probably 2014, and I actually talked to people I talked to people about this other aspect today. So let's just make up an age. Let's just say you're 60 and you're doing this, or 55 and you're doing this. One of the other challenges is how much you have to have this, what's the term, cost benefit analysis. So if you plan to work to 67 and you have 7 years left, well, if it's going to take you 3 years to get to the level you need and you only have a 4-year payback window, like there's a time element that almost has to be morphed on top of this in terms of how much are you going to invest versus what do you expect to get out of it.
You're absolutely right. For example, many people have suggested, and I've often considered that I'm professionally at a place where I should get a master's degree or an International Coaching Federation certification in order to take my work to the next level. But I'm now 62 years old, and we expect my husband and I to retire before I'm 70. So there's not enough time for me to gain back the ROI on the expense of either one of those options at this point. So I'm not going to do it. And you do need to evaluate that. I completely agree. Now, there are other people, and we all know Lynn Williams from the greater Philly area. Right? Lynn is equally pretty close to my age. I think she's a few years younger. But education was so important to her that she said, no, I don't care that I may not get the ROI. I want my doctorate degree, and I'm going to go get it, damn it. And so she's been working on her PhD. So there are a lot of factors that go into it, but I absolutely agree with you. Considering the return on the investment is very important in terms of what do we do to reskill ourselves. Now, what's also important about that is we need to recognize, as we've been talking prior to the start of the meeting as well, that if we don't maintain our skills, if we are not constantly learning something new, we are going to be left behind and potentially left out of the workforce. So what do we need to do to continue to learn, to continue to bring new skills to our employer so that they want to keep us on the job? So I think you bring up a really great point in that respect. Thanks, George. All right, let's go ahead and move on. So I am a very strong believer of identifying our target markets And this is an example of one of the types of worksheets in the book. It's 20 worksheets from start to finish. What do I want to be when I grow up, to how do I prepare my references for the job or for the reference call? And every one of them is a worksheet. They typically have an instructions page like you see on the left, followed by the worksheet that comes after it, which could be 1, 2, or 5 pages long. The second piece, though, of the job search process is to identify your target markets. And this is a place where you have the opportunity to dream, to expand our view, to think about all the potential possibilities. Once we know what those are, now we can focus them in and focus our attention on one subset of them at a time, so that we can work that area to the bone, get the job or not, and if not, move on to the next area and potentially find options and opportunities we had not ever considered before. I think that a job search target has 3 different variables in it: location, industry, and role or function. And anytime you change one of those, you've created a new target market. Once we know those 3 variables, we can then go in through research, find all of the companies that fit into those target markets. And so that's the third step really in the process, and that's researching your markets. And here are just some of the ways that you can go about doing that research. Right? We can use databases like dataaxle.com, which for all of you in New Jersey, by the way, every single public library in the state of New Jersey has a subscription to dataaxle's Reference Solutions database. Some of you may have remembered it called Reference USA. They were purchased by dataaxle and changed the name to Reference Solutions. It is a subscription database, and most of us probably can't or don't want to spend the money to afford it. So your public libraries in New Jersey all have access to it. As I've been talking about this throughout the country, definitely the larger town and city libraries have access to it, and Dun and Bradstreet Hoovers, but some of the smaller libraries will even have access to it. So you don't have to pay for the subscription. All you need is a library card, and then you can get access to it through your local library typically. And Dun and Bradstreet Hoovers oftentimes is similar, but fewer libraries seem to have access to it. So those are great databases to get lists of companies in a specific target market. It can also provide you with some of the contact information, the location by street address of their facilities, etc. You can get a lot of really amazing information out of those databases to help you determine, is this a company that I want to work for?
Paul, if I could add 2 points there, number one, your library card works remotely as well, so you don't have to physically go there. And number two, even if your local library doesn't have the resources, there's the New Jersey State Library, which your library card gives you access to as well. So they usually have all the resources that you're looking for.
And in reality, your public college libraries should allow you access to the information as well, because those are your tax dollars paying for it. I'm a big proponent of going and visiting the organization as a way of getting research and learning more about the company. Another place that people often overlook, boy, I'm tongue-tied this morning, to get information is through your professional or industry associations, which you all should be members of, by the way, and many of them will provide discounted or free memberships or free access to some of their events for those who are unemployed. But you should be participating in those professional and industry associations, because there you'll have access to lists of people. And every single one of my clients who have reached out to their alumni association has said that their alumni association has been the best place to network since the beginning of COVID. That people are really, really interested and excited to reconnect with folks from their past. And so get involved in those alumni associations. So any questions, excuse me, any other questions or comments on steps 2 and 3, targeting your search and then researching them?
The only thing I would add to this, Paul, and again, I talked about this a long time ago, but I think it still is relevant today because it shows currency of your technology acumen, is to throw something like Twitter on here, because that's going to give a very different perspective. It's on Twitter, just as an example, there's 2 pieces to take away from Twitter. If the company is actively tweeting, they're telling you what they think is important today, number one. I guess 1B, they're also targeting people that are quote unquote technology literate from that perspective. And number 3, the true treasure chest is when you look at a site, pick IBM, Microsoft, I really don't care whose account. If you look at who they're following, that gives you an insight as to the industry leaders that they're following. So if you're really looking to get yourself ready for the interview, you're going to be able to go in with a different level of thinking than most other candidates.
Great
but George,
comment,
if you want
George.
to talk about technology relevancy, don't call it Twitter.
Well, it's X. I know. Well, everyone still knows it is Twitter, but yeah.
I was going to point that out
right?
too, Frank. But
I know Twitter/X. I don't know if there's a right, but yeah, X. Honestly, I think that's the hidden jewel. Is if you go to an X account, I'll change it, right? An X account, and you look at who that account is following. Oh my God, what a treasure trove of information.
Any other comments on this slide? I would just remind you, when you look at any source for evaluating or ranking or rating employers, like Glassdoor, maybe Indeed, to a lesser extent, LinkedIn and others, just remember, you're going to have the people who were just recently fired, and they're going to give the worst review possible because they hate the company that they just got fired from. And then you're going to have the people who say it's better than sliced bread because it's so amazing place to work for, and they're the ones that the company is paid to put those up. Somewhere in the middle is the truth. So, take those reviews and evaluations with a little bit of a grain of salt.
So, Paul, one of the things I would say there is going back to our earlier conversation about the different generations. The Gen Zs and the millennials are much more open in the information they share around salaries and everything else. So when you go into a Glassdoor or a Reddit, I found that the information available out there is greatly enriched by many of their contributions because they are much more open to sharing information that, for whatever reason, the older generations weren't so ready and open to share. So,
and I absolutely agree with that. And so now you're getting a wider variety or range of data points. I still say to you, somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. And then we still need to go, and as a part of our networking and as a part of our research, we need to now go and validate whatever information or assumptions we take from those reviews. Step 4 is probably the most complicated step in the preparation phase, and that is the personal brand. And there are a whole bunch of things that we need to do with that. The first of which is to go back to that accomplishments list that we had at the beginning, and now start prioritizing that list, start looking at it from the perspective of what are the stories that we can tell. And I'm not going to go into what is a star or CAR format because I'm sure you've all heard that. But I would suggest to you that you need to do one of 2 things on your resume, as an example. And that is either take all of your star stories and use the result statement with a primary accomplishment and put that as your bullet on your resume. Or if you have a bullet on your resume, you better be able to reverse that and tell the story behind it. Because the likelihood is that as a interviewer, at some point, I'm going to probably ask you about one or more of those bullets and how you accomplished that. So you want to be able to talk about them. And these stories are how you're going to be ready to talk about them. So create those success stories. I suggest at least 10. I would probably recommend you have more. You don't need to get them all at one time, right? So don't go and say, oh my God, I need to spend the next week just creating star stories because I don't have any. But it shouldn't take you more than a couple of days to put together maybe 10 of them. And then from now going forward, just keep adding and keep adding and keep adding. I first started using star stories probably 25, 30 years ago when I first started to enter the career development world. And at this point, I've got on my computer a file folder that has over 150, almost 160 stories in it. Because every time I come up with an accomplishment, I come home and I type it out and I put it in there so that when I need to, I can go back and refer to those when they're appropriate for whatever interview that I'm on. And then I can also include those bullets into my resume when I need them on the resume. Questions here? So I think there are 4 primary parts to your personal brand. And the first one is the marketing materials, your resume, cover letter, and all of those things. Again, we're not going to go into detail on how to create all those things here, but the book has a whole bunch of worksheets that will work through all of these things. We need to look at, what do we need in the terms of physical materials, and what do we need to say on them? So, oops, I'm going too far advanced there. I thought I had another in there. So think about your resume. Think about the correct format that you want to use. Do you need a curriculum vitae? It seems more and more I'm having clients coming from the advanced scientific or educational world where they need to use a curriculum vitae. Or do you just need a simple resume, but which resume do you need? A chronological, a functional, or maybe something that's more of a hybrid or a combination of the two? I personally recommend always the hybrid or combination of the chronological and the functional, because it speaks to both HR and management. And the chronological, the HR department likes, the functional, the manager likes, but we can't give them 2 different resumes. So if you combine the 2, and there's an easy way to do that, then you can speak to both of them and give them both what they need. I also, believe it or not, am still a proponent of business cards, because I can't tell you the number of times that I go to tap phones with somebody, or actually a good friend of mine recently gave me a very inexpensive $15 dot card. And it keeps all of your contact information on it. It also puts it into a QR code, so you can just have somebody take a photo of the QR code, or you tap the dot card to their phone, and it's the size of a credit card, so it fits in your wallet, and now you can exchange contact information. However, there are a lot of people for whom that's still not an option, and so we need to use the old-fashioned paper. I also still find it faster for me to handwrite on the back of a business card information than to try and type notes into my phone. So I'll still use a business card for that purpose as well. The second piece of your marketing your branding needs to be your marketing plan. And Lynn Williams and others often call it a one-pager. Some folks refer to it as a leave behind. This is the document that I'm going to use all the time, with one exception. When it comes to an interview, I'm giving the resume. But everything else I do in my job search, I use this document. Because think about it. Look at the pictorial value of this document. Look how eye-appealing it is. And this is just one example. If you put in personal marketing plan into Google, you'll get about 150 images of all kinds of different versions of it. They're all great. But what I love about this is because you can make it truly a marketing document, a brochure with infographics, with different shading and things, you can really make it eye appealing and memorable. The key difference between a marketing plan and a resume. Your resume is talking about what you've done in the past. This is only speaking to what you want to do going forward. And what do you want to share with people? What do you want them to know and remember about you? What you've done in the past? Where you want to go? I think you want to remember where I want to go. So I want to use this kind of a document. Yeah, it has some of the same information that you'd find on a resume, but notice a couple of the differences. First off, nowhere on here do you find a list of employers that I've worked for. You do see some of the things that tell you why I'm qualified and an expert at doing what you want to do, but it doesn't tell you where I've worked. What it does have, though, is all the places where I want to work going forward, that target market list. Now, when you have a networking conversation and you're sitting down to coffee, you can actually hand this to the person and talk through it. If you're on Zoom or in other formats, or maybe you're somewhere where you don't have the document with you at the moment, you can go home and email this to the person so that they now have something tangible to remind them of the conversation, remind them of who you are and what you do, and most importantly, get them to think about who do they know in their network that they can introduce you to at those companies. Any thoughts, questions, comments here? I see a couple of the camera heads shaking like, okay, I get it now. I'm glad, thank you. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit more about what George was getting at in terms of social media. And this is the third piece of your personal brand. Here's what I want you to think about with social media. There are two key components to this. Number one, I need to be on the social media that the employer is on. The hiring manager that I want to know who I am and find me, I need to be active on that platform that they are active on. So that means, as I was working with a young man who is in travel journalism, he said, Paul, all of the people that I need to reach are going to be on Instagram or TikTok Reels. I said, then create a presence on LinkedIn just cause, but don't spend a lot of time on it. Spend your time on Instagram and TikTok, because that's where the hiring managers are going to find you. Right? For most of us, we probably need to be on LinkedIn, because for most of us, that's where our hiring authorities are going to be found, and that's where they are active. I'm actually finding now that for my business as a career coach, I need to start becoming far more active on Facebook, because I'm going to be getting more clients these days. And I've had now about 15, Alex, note this, I've had about 15 or 20 different career coaches tell me that they get more referrals from their activity on Facebook than they get on LinkedIn. So, that's what I need to start focusing on if I want to get access to more people. Where are the hiring authorities that you want access to? What platform are they on? That's the one you want to go to. So that's number one. Number two is all about engagement. So many of us think that once I connect with you on LinkedIn, we're golden, we're besties, and I'm going to help you with your job search. No, sorry, not. We need to have a relationship. And how do we develop relationship? Through conversation, through interaction with each other. And while it can be more difficult to create that relationship on LinkedIn or online, it can and should still be done. And the way we do that is through not only our own posts, but even more important, commenting back to people who comment on your posts or commenting on other people's posts. You know, Alex and I, just as an example, are constantly following each other and commenting on each other's posts. We have all kinds of conversations through LinkedIn, through our LinkedIn posts. And we created a far deeper relationship because of that. Now, when we see each other, we can't wait to visit and chat and go spend time together. We had a wonderful lunch just about a month or so ago. And that happens because we're creating the relationship online and continuing it in person. So who are the hiring managers that you want to follow? Who are the people that you want to know you? It's one thing to follow the people you want to know. In job search, it's more important for you to follow the people that you want to know you. Because if the hiring manager doesn't know you, they're not going to hire you. So how do I follow those people and then start engaging with them? And if you know, we have 2 or 3 or 4 exchanges on LinkedIn through your posts. Now, when you go to connect or you go to ask for a meeting or a phone conversation, they're more likely to do it because they recognize who you are through the conversations you've had on LinkedIn. Questions on that? Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. Oh, if I want to talk, I have to unmute myself, right? Yeah. Paul, the slide before talked about the value proposition. And I have a pet peeve here because people use the value proposition in a different way that I view value proposition. You may know I was trained about the value proposition by Uncle Chip Hartman. Now, when you say you have to create your value proposition, would you mind to kind of tell us what is your value proposition?
So yeah, my value proposition is that about 85 to 90% of my clients use this methodology in their job search. And of those that use it, 97% of them are getting employed within 3 to 5 months of the start of their job search. And I see that as far quicker than people who don't use a methodology. And so if you are interested in speeding up your job search, you should consider what I'm discussing here today.
My opinion differs a little bit. This is a kind of, look at me, I'm so wonderful, which I always say to my clients, you know, nobody believes you. The value proposition has to be very clear, communicating, you know, what you do, who are your customers, what they get out of it, and you touched based on that. And also the last one is, why should I work with Paul? I can work with John and with Mary and with Peter and so forth. So once you answer those 4 questions, then you have a value proposition. I don't know why the business world, our world, decided that this, what you did, by the way, I love it, is called the value proposition. It's almost like a look how wonderful I am statement.
Well, I kind of agree and disagree, and that's the value and the beauty of these conversations, because anytime you bring more than one career coach together, they're going to have differing opinions on how to do things. And by the way, we're all right and we're all wrong. Okay, so take what you like and throw away the rest. In this case, Alex, you notice I've got both value proposition and position statement as 2 different things. And what you've described puts both of those together from my perspective. The primary difference between those 2, from my perspective, is that the value proposition is going to speak directly to what will you gain by working with me. right? Or if you hire me, this is what you will get for doing so. The position statement is going to speak more to what are my qualifications and what have I done to show that I can do the value proposition. So the position statement is more about me. The value proposition is more about the listener or the company or the organization.
Accepted.
But
Thanks.
can I just say something? There's
Yeah.
something that's being missed here that's really integral, is that a hiring manager is looking at hundreds of these, or how many, something has to stand out quickly to him. He doesn't have hours and hours to read these, to read through your whole CV or resume to say, oh yeah, you're what I'm looking for. I want something that's going to tell me within a paragraph if, should I take a bigger look? Should I look further? Is there something here that really can help me? And that's how I see a value proposition, rather than, oh wow, I'm so wonderful since sliced bread. But that's just my take on it.
And you are right, Elizabeth. I think you're getting, though, at a different issue when you talk about employers having too many of applicants to be looking at, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But the bottom line there is, if I'm applying online, I'm one of the hundreds or thousands. If I'm networking in, I'm one of the few. And that's what we need to be doing more of, is the networking. And we're going to get to that in just a moment or two.
I have a question. I'm so sorry. Paul, I was just wondering, how do you substantiate the statements on your proposition as far as percentages? Do you have customer reviews? Because these numbers that you were giving are quite impressive. But how do you substantiate that claim?
And you're absolutely right, Victoria. You do need to have the details to go behind it. And so in my case with that, yes, I do have them. My business problem, or one of the things I need to be better at doing in my business is translating all of these wonderful testimonials that I have from hundreds of clients over the last 5-7 years, and getting them actually onto my website or into my LinkedIn, so that you can see them and say, oh yeah, he's not really BSing me. And that's one of the things that's one of my specific business goals for this calendar year, actually. So,
and if I could add some things, Victoria and Elizabeth, thank you, because both of you made very relevant comments.
yes.
When we started the Breakfast Club over 22 years ago, the big thing that we found in our beginnings was that the job search process is broken. It's by far a very clean and neat process. So what we had done is broken up each aspect of the job search process, and we looked for ways to give each of our members advice that gave them an edge over, the other candidates at each step. So, the tools like making the case with your resume, doing a T letter, using PARs, all of these different little pieces, each on their own won't get you the job, but it's to give you a slight edge at each step of the process so that you achieve the interim milestones or achievements of getting the interview, how to do better in the interview, and then ultimately how to position yourself, because everybody that gets that far is normally qualified for the job or they wouldn't have been brought in. But how do you become the one that gets selected and gets the job offer? And, each of these steps together are when you add them all up, is why then you become the candidate that is the successful candidate in getting the job offer. So, the techniques, the approaches, the advice, all of that is to give you a better edge and to achieve each of those milestones along the way. And, I'd be glad to talk more about it later. And if either of you or both of you are in transition, we'll have the facilitated networking after the presentation, and hopefully, you can see some of it there on your personal circumstances.
Okay.
And I want to welcome Carol Martinek to the group. Glad you joined us this morning. Is the value proposition preferred to or in addition to your resume is one of her questions. And the quick answer to that is you incorporate this value proposition into your resume. Typically, it's going to be one of the very first things at the top of your resume. Often people would call it an objective, God help us, or a summary. But whatever you're putting at the very top of your resume, it's going to include aspects of, if not the entire position statement and value proposition, because those are the things that are going to say to the reader of that resume, oh, this is someone I need to take a closer look at. So I'll put it right up top there. And a key cover letter is simply where you list on one side of the cover letter, here are all of your requirements or expectations for the position, and here's where I meet each one of those. And you go one for one. You're looking for a bachelor's degree, I have it. You're looking for 5 years experience, I have it. You're looking for this skill, I've done it here. You're looking for that, right? And you just go straight down like that to create a cover letter that tells the reader, I meet all of your requirements, and here's where you can find it on my resume. There's a lot more that we can go into on those things, and I don't want to take the time this morning to do that because we don't have it. But I'm glad you're here, and I hope you continue to participate in this and some of the other networking and accountability groups for job seekers, because you can learn a lot more from those groups by participating in these events. So looking at
oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Could you please drop in a chat which groups you would recommend for networking and support?
So Victoria, at the end of the presentation, I list the few that I personally co-facilitate. Dave Schuckman is the owner of PSG Mercer, which is another great group to participate in. And Dave, you want to just quick comment on that, because I don't want to run out of time for us.
Yeah, so we could talk about it after the meeting, but there's also a website, landingexpert.com, landingexpert.com, spells like it sounds, and on it is a menu item called networking or networking groups. Click on that, and you'll be able to put in, you'll be able to search for groups in your area.
Right, and my networking central is another. Alex Freund happens to be the landing expert, and that's his website. And Nancy Aronson helped create the My Networking Central. So you've got a couple of experts right here that you can turn to help you in finding those groups. But they're both great websites, especially for New Jersey, to identify, or the greater New Jersey area, what groups exist in this space. And there are a bunch of them, probably 30 to 50 networking groups like this one that operate in different ways. We'll talk about the ones I'm on later. So this is a typical of the kind of worksheet that I would put in my book for how do you use LinkedIn. And while things on LinkedIn are changing, certainly things with resumes will change from time to time. What I've tried to include here are those things that are timeless, that are least likely to change, but most overarching in their impact on your job search. So the LinkedIn worksheet has two pieces to it. One is how do you create a good profile? And the second piece is how do you do the engagement? So you get some direction to help get you started if you need that help in your job search. And then the last piece of your networking or your branding is your introductions. And notice how when Alex asked me, Paul, what is your personal brand or your value proposition, I was able to just spit it right out. If we were to go around the room and do 30-second introductions, are you, and I expect most of you probably are, prepared to be able to just give your 30-second introduction without hesitation? That's what we need to do. We need to not know so much have it memorized, but know it well enough that no matter what situation I'm in, when someone says, so Paul, tell me about yourself, or hey, Paul, what is it that you do, by the way? I can immediately answer that question without hesitation, without too much thought, and customize it so that it fits the conversation that I'm having with you, which may be different from the current conversation I'm having with this one or the conversation I'm having with that one. And so we create our introductions. We need 3 different introductions, a short one, 10 seconds, the 30-second elevator pitch, and then the 90-second commercial. And our good friend Marty Latman strongly recommends that we have 2 sets of them. One that's heavily jargon laden for people in our industry, but one that's also very simplified for anybody and everybody to understand. And so we need essentially 6 different introductions. And you know, the 10-second is kind of like, I like to connect them to a news broadcast. You know, yesterday morning I'm watching the Today Show, and Savannah says, you know, severe storms continue to rack the Midwest. Come back after the break to hear Al's forecast and learn more about what's happened. That was 10 seconds. We need something quick and easy that's a teaser, that draws people in, that get them to want to be in conversation with you, to want to ask you questions, right? Then we come back from break, and Savannah says, yesterday there were over 40 tornadoes up and down the Midwest and the entire Mississippi Valley, from Chicago to Dallas. Over 15 people were killed and 150 were injured. 5 towns were completely decimated. Let's go to Al to learn more about what today's weather is going to be. So now she's given us 30 seconds, a little bit more information, a little bit clearer understanding of the destruction, but holy crap, I want to find out more about that, because is it coming my way to New Jersey? Right? And so now Al comes on and says the entire weather forecast. And then probably they followed that with, now let's go to the reporter down in, you know, Podunk, Texas, or wherever, that just the town destroyed by the tornado. And now they get a report there. So there's the 90-second commercial, or the 90-second introduction. And each one is building on the one before, and each one is drawing you deeper and deeper and deeper into conversation with me. That's the goal of our introductions. Quick questions on that. So when you've done all of that stuff, you've done the preparation work. Holy crap, we've spent half the presentation just on the first 4 steps, or first 4 milestones in our project. But that's the importance of that foundation. Once we've done that, now we enter the active job search phase, and that's where we start talking about networking and how are we going to do the networking, what networking are we going to do. If you haven't picked this up already, here's the #1 rule of job search from my perspective, and I think most coaches would agree with this. Your job search is not about you. Your job search is about the hiring manager. By that, I mean everything you say, everything you do, everything you put in writing has to be done in a way that meaningfully speaks to the hiring authority, that gets the hiring authority to say, holy crap, you're the person I need. Right? So all of this stuff we've done so far, while it's talking about me and what I'm done and how great I am, I need to be doing it and saying it in a way that's meaningful and valuable to the hiring manager. So now when I go networking, my goal is to get access to the hiring manager, because that's the only person who can put us on payroll and get us the job. So even though I have a huge network, Alex, Dave, Frank, many of us here have huge networks, and we're absolutely willing to share them with you, If I don't know you well enough to know and understand who in my network is the right person for you to talk to, you're not going to get access to that person. Right? So when a first step of networking is, who do I know that knows the hiring manager, or who do I know that know people in the company that I want to work for? And how can I use them in a good way to gain access to those hiring authorities? That's this general networking. Now remember, networking is about building relationships. Networking is about giving of yourself first. Because if all you do is come to me and take and say, Paul, help, 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 but you never do anything to help me, I'm not going to talk to you after a while. Right? That's just human nature. So you want to always be asking, how can I help you? You always go to your network. Hey, what can I do to help you? How can I make your life better? What are some of your issues in your job? How can I help resolve those for you? What can I offer you? And once you started offering people stuff, all of a sudden they're going to want to start offering you stuff. And now you can get access to their network. So that's where the engaging is important. That's where setting up the coffee conversations is important. That's where, Alex and I sharing on this meeting how much we appreciate each other's expertise is important. I'm building relationship with Alex when I do that. Right? These are the things that we need to do. And when you start that conversation with someone who knows the hiring manager or who knows someone in the company you want to work for, you're going to, over 2, 3, 4 conversations, maybe a month of time, start steering the conversation to where, hey, by the way, Alex, I really want to get to know some of these things. In fact, I made a note to myself, and I think I even put it in the chat. Frank, you and I got to talk some more about the young professionals, because there's absolutely synergies there for us to work on. And so I want to offer to the Breakfast Club access to the people that I have in my young professionals group, with the hope that Frank will offer to me access to the young professionals that are in your organization as they develop. But that's where networking together is going to help each of us. So general networking are the people who can get us access to the hiring manager, or potentially someone who can access the hiring manager. And I'm going to show you in a little bit some metrics behind these, but we'll get to that in a couple more slides. Questions here?
I would just reinforce the message by saying, the whole approach of the Breakfast Club has been for 22 years, help us help you. We have no ulterior motives here. We come and help freely. A lot of the people that you see on the meeting today are alumni that went through the group and have come back to volunteer their time for many years. So that's really what we try and do, is lead by example in helping the people. And it's a rarity, unfortunately, in today's environment that we all find ourselves. So a lot of people have given us such tremendous feedback over the year, because we're not out there looking to be compensated. We're just here giving freely, trying to bring good presenters, good messaging, and genuinely just trying to help others.
And you know what, Frank, the group does a great job of that. I always am hearing from people how much they've enjoyed their activity and participation in the Breakfast Club. And that's what most all of the job seeker networking groups are about, is that exact same purpose. And we all do a great job. Dave Shuckman's PSG Mercer is an amazing group to work with, and he always gets a good 30 people or so to participate in his group. So there are a lot of resources here for you in that respect. So once we've gotten the general networking done, they're starting now to introduce us to hiring managers or hiring authorities. And now we're networking with them. In fact, the last thing we're going to do when we get to talk to a hiring authority is say, hey, do you have a job for me? Because we don't want to be seen as needy. We don't want to be seen as the only reason I want to know you is because you can hire me, right? We need to be offering, how can I help you? What do you need from me? And I can't tell you the number of clients that I've had, probably about 6 or 8 a year for the last 10 years, who have said to me, what the hiring manager needed when I was talking to them first was recommendations for somebody to fill a position that I'm not appropriate for. But I gave them the name of someone. Next thing you know, when the position I wanted became available, all of a sudden I'm their first phone call because they remembered that I got them a good quality person. And if that's the case, then I must be a good quality person myself. So we're always offering to the other rather than taking. Right? But we want to connect with these hiring authorities any way we can. We want to engage in conversation with them any way we can. And ultimately, over the course of a month or two, 4 or 5 conversations, we'll be able to then steer the conversation to the point where they're going to say, holy crap, I need you on my team. How do we make that happen? Well, it just so happens that I'm looking for work right now, so let's make that happen. What position do you got for me, right? And it organically, it naturally flows and happens. So the networking takes 3 steps. The first is general networking with people who can introduce us to hiring authorities, because chances are most of us don't know the hiring manager at the company we want to work for. The second step is now talking to those hiring managers. And then the third step is to get them to give us an interview. And we can spend a good, hell, Alex spends 3 or 4 or 5, 6 hours with clients on interview preparation. So we're not going to go into all the ins and outs of interview preparation today. But we need to do a lot of work to prepare for the interview. And so one piece of that is, who do we have all of our stories put together? Do we have all of our the pieces of the puzzle, the questions that we want to ask? Are they prepared? Have we done enough research on the organization? What are the things we've learned about the organization we want to share as a part of the interview? Right. So we've created our star and car, or as Frank called it, PAR stories. They're all the same thing. We've collected all of the organizational research that we need. I espouse a 4-step interview process that allows us to start taking some control of the interview from start to finish, and gets us at the end a real understanding of whether or not I'm going to be selected to move forward in the process. So I strongly recommend you consider that. And then the book, for example, talks about checklists that we can use in order to prepare for the interview. And this, for example, is the checklist that you would use for any and every interview. But then I have another checklist that's just for online interviews or video interviews, and another one that's for in-person interviews, things that may be slightly different that we need to do to prepare for each one of those. And so there's a lot of resources there to help you prepare for that interview so that you put your best foot forward when you go into the interview. So quick questions on networking or interviewing, because I know I went through those 3 steps pretty quick. Okay.
The only thing I would add to networking is, on our website, you can join the Breakfast Club. Everything's free. Once you're in, you get a email ID that is for groups.io. That email address allows you to send an email to the Breakfast Club NJ at groups.io, which in turn goes to all of our members. So from a networking standpoint, as you're going through your transition, if you have questions on job search, just post it out to the group. Take your elevator pitch, put it in writing, send it out to all the members of the group. People don't use that channel to the level that I feel it should be used. I should be seeing messages every day from the people that are on job search, asking, does anybody have contacts at, XYZ company that I'm targeting? I'm facing this dilemma related to job search. Can somebody help? And then all the different members that are on that email chain will see it and respond to you and help you. So that is, again, just for being a member, which doesn't cost anything, a source for everybody who's in job search to really leverage the network. Once you join the Breakfast Club, we have a great guy, Haresh Kaswani, who's not here today, but Haresh runs our LinkedIn group. Get into our LinkedIn group, which is a hidden group on LinkedIn. But what it allows you to do then is see everybody who's come through the Breakfast Club that belongs to the LinkedIn group, then put together a message and connect to each one of them. You'll see your direct contacts, your level 2 contacts, and beyond grow substantially. So now a lot of these hiring managers who you may not be connected to now, either they'll become, second degree contacts, or in many cases first degree contacts, or you'll have a way to get to them. So all the things we're talking about with the networking, you've got these things free to you that all you have to do is take advantage of it. The reason we went to Meetup is not only to publicize the group so people can join, but that list to see everybody who's signed up to attend. And as you're talking to them now, usually there's an avatar with their face, and you've got the name. So if you remember the name and not the face, you can follow up with these people to make it easier. So we've tried all these different aspects to make sure, even our Facebook group, LinkedIn is important, but as Paul was talking about, there's 4 times as many people on Facebook. So if you're trying to connect with people, from your past, from high school, from college, from previous employers, maybe some of them don't have a LinkedIn, but more than probability, they probably have a Facebook. So use all these channels to your advantage. And again, tap them as you have questions, as you're facing certain concerns. And these are the people that have been where you are. We always say job search is the hardest job you'll ever have. They'll reach out to you because they're compassionate and they want to help you. And they have the knowledge and the empathy because they've gone through this process before.
I see, Carol, that you also asked, what do you do if right from the start the interviewer seems annoyed? And I think that's a question that's going to require a lot more information from you to understand the situation to really respond to here. So I'm putting in the chat one more time my contact information. And you're welcome to reach out to me or even Alex Freund for a quick conversation to talk a little bit more about that, or I'm sure anybody else on the call would be happy to help you with that specific situation. So this is a space where I think most people ignore, and that's preparing your references for the conversation. So this is the worksheet from the book on references. And here's what I like to try and do. First off, I really, really work very hard not to give you references unless or until we've had an interview or even preferably a job offer. And part of the reason for that is I've got like 30 people that I would consider references. So until I've have more conversation and information than what I got off the job description, I don't know which ones are really the most appropriate persons for you. So I want to have enough information that I can select the right people to use. Then I want to prepare those people for the conversation. I want to share with them the resume that I gave to the employer. I want to share the job description with them. I'm going to either share my written notes or certainly have a conversation with the reference discussing what was done in the interview process and what are the important things for this interviewer, so that when they get the reference call from the company, they're ready and prepared to speak to what's important to this particular reference. Then I want to prepare the caller for the reference call as well. So typically what I'll say to an employer is, I would be happy to provide you with the references you need. Give me just 24 hours, because I want to make sure that I not only select the right people for you, but also that they are currently available to receive your call. So I give myself some time. Then I go to my list of references. I have the conversations, prep them. I complete then this form. And this is what I will then send to the employer so they can do the reference conversation. And, you know, the standard information that's here is important. You know, the relationship I've had with the person, how long has that relationship been? You know, were they a supervisor? Were they a customer? Are they a friend that I worked with as a volunteer, right? What was my relationship with them? How long have I known them? A couple of years, a couple of decades, right? How long? Most important, though, is I'm telling the caller, these are the topics that you want to discuss with this particular individual. Give you an example. David and Alex know me very well, and they absolutely know my presentation abilities and my knowledge of the job search process. And if I were to use them as a reference, they could easily speak to that. Scott Boudreau and Nancy, they know me from a different perspective. Yeah, they know those things about me, but they also know me for my abilities as a career coach. And so I would want the interviewer to talk to them about my empathy, my listening skills, my coaching ability. So on this sheet, I'm going to say, David Schuckman, presentation skills, knowledge of the job search process. Nancy Aronson, coaching skills, empathy, and listening. And they're going to then, you know, the goal for me is I've prepped Nancy to talk about those topics. I've now told the interviewer to ask about those topics. I've controlled their conversation as much and as best as I can to ensure that I get the best reference possible. And I might even, when I'm talking with Nancy and David, role play a little bit with them. I expect that this interviewer is going to ask you this question. How would you respond to that? Right? And that's what we're going to try and do. And then I send this sheet over to the interviewer. Now I know that these folks are ready to accept the call, and I know that they're prepared for the conversation. So, references, questions or comments on that?
Paul, this is David. I'm sorry, I stepped away for a moment. There is a question in chat from Carol about Facebook. Did you address that?
No. And generally,
so I'll read it. Isn't the generally accepted opinion regarding Facebook that it can hurt more than help? I was told to retire my Facebook account while looking by another professional manager.
So again, Carol, where is the hiring manager going to be found? If the hiring manager is going to be found on Facebook, then you need to be active on Facebook. The broader issue, I think, that this professional hiring manager was saying to you is that there's a lot of non-business related information that becomes available on Facebook. So you have to be more retrospect, I guess is the right word, about how you curate your Facebook account. That may mean, for example, that if there are people on either end of the political extremes in your network, on Facebook, you might want to eliminate them so that all of their, divergent beliefs and thoughts don't get posted and viewed on your Facebook account. So when the hiring manager goes to see it, they're not seeing things that are maybe inappropriate for that organization. Another example, my niece is a young woman, a wonderful young woman. I love her to death. When she was in college, she started to be a little inappropriate with alcohol. And for about 4 or 5 years while she was actively drinking, every picture that her friends posted of her on Facebook was her and maybe a group of friends holding a glass of alcohol, drunk off their what, happy go lucky smiling. And you could clearly tell that they've been drinking way too much. She doesn't want future employers to see that. Right? So she's removing as much of that as she can. Very difficult to do, completely different conversation. And she's limiting the people that she now friends or connects with on Facebook in order to ensure that she gets presented on Facebook in the way that she wants to be presented, in a more positive way. Side note, thank God she's been actively in recovery for about 5 years now and is doing very well, thank God. But these are the kinds of things that we have to think about with any or all of our social media. And for the most part, I'm not so much concerned about what you're going to say about you on social media. I'm more concerned about what other people are going to say, and when they tag you on social media, that employers can then go and find out about you. That's where people are getting in trouble with social media. That's a nutshell on that question.
Paul, one piece I give on this, only because I've been actually amazed on this specific to Facebook. Some of the and this is kind of a different angle to the answer. There are several AI groups on Facebook that, my God, if you want to connect with people, those are the groups that you want to be in. The amount of information that they share,
yes,
the insights that they give. So again, there's multiple ways when you talk about these social networks of how you're looking at them. There's the social network, as you know, social network, great. But what you will find is that these forums can appear anywhere: Facebook, Reddit, LinkedIn, on and on and on. And it's really, to me, it's about, if you understand those channels and you're in an interview, that will show your currency of knowledge. And to me, that you can't replace that. If all you're doing is saying, yeah, I was looking at a newspaper to try and learn about your company, that pretty much dates you out of the gate, right? But if you start saying, I saw something on Reddit, I saw something on Twitter, I'm engaged within these groups, it's a completely different veneer.
You're right. You're absolutely right. So,
and Paul,
again, we can have a whole conversation just on how to manage social media. But I want to be conscious of my time with you. Yeah. So, Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing about social media. A lot of the social media posts come with date and time stamps as well. So, especially if you're working, if they're seeing an inordinate amount of posts during the workday time frame, a prospective employer, if you're currently employed while you're in job search, is starting to wonder, what is it that you're really doing during the day? If, they're seeing that you work currently and they're seeing during the day, you're posting all this stuff, or even posting videos of going places during the workday. So make sure you're cognizant of the date and time stamp aspect of it, and that a lot of these posts, you know, they're going to make the connection that you're doing that instead of your work during the day. So there's just a lot of subtleties out there that you have to be careful of beyond the digital dirt, Paul, that you talked about.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'm just trying to read here Edward's question. Okay, so the bottom line of Edward's question is, I'm giving you appropriately a labor-intensive process for your job search, and in essence, he's asking, is it really worth it? And the answer, from my perspective, based on my clients' experiences, is absolutely yes. And I'll put it to you in two different ways. One is, what have you been doing? And I suspect that for most of us, the number one response to that question is going to be an online job search. I'm looking at the job boards and applying online. Well, how successful has that been for you, and how long have you been in search? And of course, we all know the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? So if what you're doing is not working, you got to do something else. Right? Number two, finding a job is a full-time job, and you need to put a full-time effort into finding a job. Now, the problem most people have with that is, what the hell do I do all day? How do I find stuff that's appropriate stuff to do to fill 8 hours of a day and not just be on the job boards? Which really leads right to this slide, because we need to manage the statistics, the metrics of our job search, and through those metrics, understand what it is we need to do more of to be successful.
So,
Most people,
Paul,
yeah.
I would say, job search is fraught with uncertainty. And unfortunately, the bills and all don't go on hold, and you have to engage as quickly as you can. And what you're doing is taking them from unstructured job search to structured job search with
Yes.
well thought through, proven steps that are going to address everything, that's going to give them that edge at each step. And ultimately, those edges are going to address those uncertainties and get them to get an offer letter quicker by following that structured approach. Because
Yes.
are they going to spend the same time? They may spend the same time and even more in an unstructured way. But if they're not hitting on all these things and giving themselves the edge at each point, they're not going to address the uncertainty and get to the finish line. So, unfortunately, the online and the submitting into the black hole is as good as going out and buying a lottery ticket in many cases. I saw somebody that wasted 3 months of their time because they didn't even know to take the resume and run it through an ATS tracker. And the resume was never even being seen by anybody because of some font types and other things that they selected. And they had no visibility, and we're just concerned why they never got a call back for an interview. And knowing how important it is to get that referral into the hiring manager, and how less than 7% of the time that happens, but it accounts for over 75% of the offer letters. That is such a critical piece. Unless you have everything put in order in a structured way like this, that they're just not going to know what the missing link is, that they're not employing in their techniques.
Thank you. Perfect, Frank. And I'm going to show you a little bit more real quick about this in terms of the numbers, Ed. And it comes right from Sales 101, right? For a salesperson to make a good business-to-business sale, they need to put out 5 proposals. To put out 5 proposals, they have to have at least 20 warm prospects, 20 companies that have said, gee, we're interested in your product, we want to learn more. To find 20 companies interested in the product, they have to have at least 100 cold prospects, right? Now, let's turn that to a job. If I want to get at least one offer, I need to have 5 interview processes going on with 5 different organizations or 5 different positions. To get those 5 interviews, I probably need to have 20 hiring managers that I've been talking to who are interested in talking to me further and considering me for an interview. To get those 20 hiring managers, I need to have at least 100 positions, not openings, but positions in my target markets. So for example, if you want to be a CFO, the chances are the company only hires one. Right? And so you probably need 100 different companies in your job search to have 100 positions. But if you're a recent grad looking for, the customer service phone position at, say, Comcast, they hire thousands of people for that job. So you may only need that one company because they've got more than 100 positions in that same role. Now we need to find the 20 hiring managers from those that are going to actually be interested in talking to you. And from those 20, the 5 that are really interested in interviewing you to get the one that's going to offer you the job, right?
Paul,
but how do I know?
Paul, the only thing I would suggest changing is instead of just 100 positions, I would say 100 qualified submissions.
No.
Because, you really have to put the proposals forth in order to, get your value prop and everything out there so it's under consideration.
Yeah, and I absolutely disagree with that, Frank, because if we've done all of the right preparation work, we'll get 5 interviews from 20 hiring managers, and one of those interviews will be an offer. If we don't get an offer out of 5 interviews, something's wrong there, and we need to fix what's going on in our interview process.
I'm saying 100 qualified submissions to get to.
No, I don't want you applying online. I don't want you submitting to 100 open positions. No.
Maybe you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. Putting together 100 qualified submissions, meaning the cover letter, making the case with the resume, including the T letter in the cover letter, etc. And then you're networking in parallel to get to all of those hiring managers, but you may not have 100%
so I think
results in getting to them.
Given that, I think we're saying the same thing a different way.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So if we recognize these numbers, now we can track metrics, right? And this is an example from the book of one dashboard that you might want to use to track your metrics. And you decide what are the things that are most important to you to track, right? But I want to see, are you talking to enough people at your target companies? Are you getting to enough hiring managers, right? And if we look week over week, how many are we talking to? We can see where we're deficient or why we're not getting the results that we want. Let me see, come on. Here's another version of the same thing, and these are the numbers that I would recommend for a full-time job search in both of these different dashboards, right? But you watch week over week, am I putting full 40 hours into my job search? Well, if not, maybe I need to consider adding more time to my search, right? How many networking contacts am I making each week? If I'm not talking to 10 people a week, then I'm probably not talking to enough people to get access to hiring managers. And so we can track through this, are we doing enough of the right things to get to the job we want? And here's the other thing. I can then celebrate at the end of the week. I made it. Finally, this week I'm talking to 10 people. Yay! Now I can keep that up because I'm doing it, right? So we can celebrate a lot of small wins that will help keep us motivated in moving forward in our search. Whereas if our only metric is, did I get a job? We only have one chance of success. and every day we don't have a job, we fail, that makes us feel worse about ourselves. We need to reverse that. Celebrate these small wins. So, gone through the entire job search process. People often say to me at the end of this presentation, Paul, you've overwhelmed me with too much. I get it. It can be overwhelming. But that's why we want to break it down into these smaller pieces and address each piece one at a time. And by doing that, we're going to ultimately get to the success that we want. And my clients are doing it in 3 to 5 months in most cases.
And Paul, I applaud you because, anybody who's in transition that's listening to this, instead of being overwhelmed, if they sit there and they see there's points that you brought up that they're currently not doing or missing, these may be the missing links that will help them be successful.
Thank
And,
you. Yes.
they should really be embracing it to say, thank you. Now I know what I'm missing.
Yes. Thank you.
Frank, to your point, this, Elizabeth, if I may, is that people have to reframe the way they're looking at searching for a job today. I don't think it's just like 15 years ago. You didn't have all these wonderful tools. You didn't have all these different platforms or, so easily to be able to reach out or network someone or know something that's going on in the way before. It's like I think it went from like horse and buggy or whip to kind of like you're in a Ferrari now. And I think you really need to, you're right, embrace all these different channels or forms that you can use that will help you to find that job.
When we started way back after the 9/11 tragedy, there were two networking groups. One was called TANG, and the Technology Executive Networking Group that Ed Pospisil built, and the other one was ITNet that used to meet at the Yonkers Library. That was it. It was a desert out there. So, that's why we formed the Breakfast Club and did everything we did. And then, Alex, we talked about, him having the networking group on his list. That was actually created by a lawyer, and it was called Hibbard's List. And Hibbard actually had been helping people in job search and compiled a list of all the networking groups. And then Alex amazingly took it to the next level of reaching out to those groups, understanding who the founders were, what their missions were. So there's networking groups out there by profession, by geography, by different industry types, different levels. So there's something out there for everybody. The Breakfast Club, we've always tried to be everything to everybody because we've helped everybody from forklift drivers and admins all the way up to C-level executives across, CFO, CIO, CEO, you name it, and everything in between. So, find the group, go out there, meet the different people because there are different circles that you're going to enter, and building your network around them is going to really increase the knowledge, expose you to new tools, new approaches. And then again, like we talked about with going across the different generations from Gen Z up and they having different approaches. And then once you're aware of them, see what's right for you, see what you're comfortable with, and then employ them in your search. But there's a lot of great new things, as you said, coming up. When we started out, we didn't even have social media. Our big thing was when a Yahoo group came along. We created a Yahoo group for the Breakfast Club. But I'll tell you, the amount of interaction we had with messages every month far exceeded what we're seeing now when we should be much more connected and leveraging these platforms. I don't know why the people aren't engaging that way because the monthly meeting is but 12 instances a year. We should be doing this networking, the whole 12 months, not just once a month at the meeting. So take advantage of it. It's all been built out there for you. It's kind of like the field of dreams. It's all built
Frank,
out. It's
I
ready to
want to
leverage.
interrupt you. I want to interrupt you because I want to get to just a couple of things. Carol's got another question in the chat, and
Sure.
I've got like just 2 or 3 more slides that will address some of the other things that have come up, and then we're done from my perspective. So, Carol, I appreciate what you're saying about not being sales oriented and therefore making the job search more difficult, or if you're an introvert, it's more difficult. I'd be lying to you if I said you were wrong. That is very true. But I think if you consider many of the things that we talked about this morning and you take them the one small step at a time and you build on them as this process builds on itself, that will help you to overcome or at least be able to manage those fears and concerns related to not being sales oriented and being an introvert. It may mean a little more work for you. I'm not going to deny that. Okay. But it absolutely is something that you can get past and we can do. And then you may want or need someone to work with you to help you through that, like a career coach. And so please consider that as an option. Earlier, we were talking about what networking groups exist other than the Breakfast Club. These are the groups that I co-facilitate, the YOJO Club, which stands for Young Job Seekers. That's a group that I have every other Friday from 1 to 3:30 or 1 to 2:30. In the Outstanding Careers group is for the LGBTQ community. Executives and Job Transition is really for anybody and everybody. That meets once a month on Mondays. The Panther Alumni Career Coaching is for alumni of Florida Institute of Technology specifically, which is my alma mater. But if your alma mater is not doing something for its alumni in helping them with their job search, I'd be more than happy to help you work with the school to develop something. And then we've talked about Dave Shuckman's professional services group of Mercer County. I co-facilitate the professional support group of Morris County, and we meet Wednesday mornings on Zoom. So all of these groups meet on Zoom. If you contact me directly, I'll be more than happy to get you connected to any one or all of them that are appropriate for you or anyone that you know. I'm doing a lot of presentations in the next couple of months. So this is just a sample list of some of the things that I've got coming up. And if you're interested in any of those, by all means, let me know and I'll be happy to get you connected so that you can attend them. This second one here really seems interesting to me. Get to know age-friendly employers. And it's a series of presentations that's being done by Massachusetts 50 Plus. And so I'll be the host of their panel in June for that one. And the ISC Squared annual conference is the Cybersecurity Professional Association. And at their annual conference in June, they're having 2 training tracks. One is to improve your education in the field. The other is to learn more about job search and how to conduct a better job search. So lots of different options for you there. There's my contact information again. And the book, again, is available on Amazon. I like to ask 2 questions at the end of every conversation I have with a group of people. The first one, and I would love to get 2 or 3 responses. What did you like most about this presentation, or what are you most going to take away from our conversation today?
Hi, this is Robin. I'm happy to share feedback on that. And I think that the way that you framed up the data and the idea of that is a way to reinforce progress and get wins along the way was a really useful framing for me. And along line to that, I just had a thought I wanted to share for Carol's question or her statement, because I come from a background of the neuroscience for how we're using that science to apply to be higher performers and to improve our thinking. And so the one thing I would say is that belief that you're screwed because you're different, I'd really challenge finding the way to reframe that, because that one underlying belief can prime you to miss opportunities instead of seeing them. So if you can find a way to reframe in your thinking how those special skills, what's great about your introvertedness or your not selling yourself always, but doing a good job maybe? And what are those good things so that you can use that to like motivate you forward? Because you don't need
Robin, I
things
love
getting
what you're
away.
saying. I absolutely love what you're saying. I agree with you completely. And thank you for sharing that. And I love the art behind you.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm a fan.
Well, this is Jerry. I'd
Yeah.
like to add, I think what I was very impressed with, and this is something a lot of people have problems with, when you're doing job search, they tend to be very qualitative, and a lot of times they forget what they've done. So if there is a problem, it's hard to identify it. By quantifying this and keeping lists and tracking it, if you were to work with a professional, that's like yourself or anyone else who works as a career coaching area, you'd have metrics, you'd have something to show them and say, don't really know what's wrong, but here's what's happening and here's what I've been doing. Without that, I'm not sure you're going to really get the support you'd really need. So I think it's a great idea in quantifying it. So kudos to you.
Thank you. And Edward, thank you for your reinforcing that the Breakfast Club brings in presentations which will be informative and thought-provoking, improving the job search, including networking between those in industry and those needing jobs. And that probably is one of the most important things for you to take away from today. Attending these job seeker support groups is very important, and I never, ever want to take away from that. However, job seeker support groups is not where hiring managers are usually found. And so we have to get to the hiring managers. And where are they found? That's where we need to go. So I'm glad you're bringing that into the conversation again. Thank you. One more
and
thought.
Paul, Chris here. I want to share my thoughts that so I like you putting everything into like worksheets and tables. I guess being an engineer myself, I just love everything presented in a table form. But I really loved about your presentation is I love how you connect some of your advice to your personal experience, right? You talked about how you find clients or what's your experience on Facebook, right, versus other platforms. So instead of just some abstract information, at least you're connecting how they apply to you, right, yourself personally. So really great content. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. The second question that I'd like to ask is anything you'd like to see me do different or better? And I'll suggest that you just throw that into the chat because I'm sure Frank and David want to keep and Jerry want to keep things moving. So thank you guys. I'm grateful for this time. I appreciate you taking time out of a Saturday morning, especially a beautiful day like today. I hope you get outside and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Well, Paul, thank you very much. You are always a wonderful supporter, not just of job seekers, but also groups like ours. So we certainly appreciate that. And so I want to just let folks know as we wrap up, and I turn it over to Frank in a moment. If you want, you can download the chat. If you have your screen open, there should be the chat box. You'll probably see 3 dots. That's a menu. You can download it, get all this information. Also, another day or two on our group's website, there's a speakers page. The page is called Speakers, and we will soon post the chat there, probably another day or so. In a moment, we'll end the video. We'll post the video on our YouTube channel, and that's available as well. And the Breakfast Club will be meeting next month. June 8th. I can't believe almost half the year has gone by. And the little bit of monumental news, that will be our last virtual only meeting, because in July we will be moving to the East Brunswick Public Library. That information is in chat as well. So next month, Jeff Altman will be here. Leverage AI. AI is artificial intelligence, George. Leverage AI in your job search. And so this will be the second of at least 3 AI-related programs we will be offering this year. So a lot of not only relevant content that we try to provide, but a lot of current relevant content as well. So with that, thanks very much again to Paul and Frank. If you'd like some parting words, please do so.
Well, I just wanted to thank Paul. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I also, if anybody's going to drop, I wanted to make sure for the mothers, we wish them happy Mother's Day.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And do remember, we are hanging around in just a moment, so you can keep your sessions on. We'll be having a hosted discussion by Frank, but hang on a moment. I will stop the recording and simply say for the moment, bye, everybody.